Okay, that's better. So, Q&A.
Joining us now is Jonny von Wallstrom, the director of the Pearl of Africa.
Just Easter, you know, all that stuff. I just got back from LA as well. We were there last week, or was it this week? Yeah, last week, shooting a commercial. So I got back on Thursday, and now I am just like sore from traveling and Easter rest. I don't know if you can call it rest, but either way, like, Q&A is on. This is actually an interesting week because we are releasing our first course, I hope. We're finishing stuff right now. So we did one course and we shot the whole thing, and then we just realized, okay, this is gonna take forever to edit because it's many hours. It's not like it's 2 or 3, it's like maybe 7 hours. So it's like a huge course. So then we just made another one that's shorter about color grading, because a lot of you have asked for more in-depth stuff. We do color grading films, like tutorial stuff, all the time, but we just felt like, okay, so that's never gonna be enough for you to kind of get into the whole concept of grading, especially in Resolve, because it's so advanced. So we made a course about it, and that's gonna come out, I don't know, I don't wanna promise anything, but I think Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, together with a color grading episode that's connected to the Confused African. So that's gonna be interesting to see, like, how that whole thing works, because we're trying anything right now for to kind of find a new way of working with like funding our docs, building an audience, all that. It kind of shows, if you analyze what we do, doing the courses, doing the tutorial stuff, doing the docs, doing the commercials, all that, and the behind the scenes series that we're filming right now of the new documentary, all that will show like our concept of how to work with independent filmmaking in the future. And the Confused African is just one like example of that. I think the Confused African is probably what we did with the Pearl of Africa, but the Pearl of Africa couldn't be tied, and it couldn't be made as efficient as the Confused African in terms of doing the behind the scenes stuff and then the series, because we didn't think about it. We just like, it was an afterthought to do tutorials that was built around how we made the film. For the new film, which is not the Confused African and which is not the Pearl of Africa, we are filming stuff as they happen. So it's a totally different thing. It's gonna be a real proper doc. That's probably gonna be more hours than the doc we're making, about how we're making the doc. So now that we were in LA last week, like, we were there to shoot the commercial, but there's always time for like idle time being there. So we set up a lot of meetings with 2 agents, met a friend that's a programmer at Sundance as well. So we just try to, you know, keep our network going. And yeah, that meetings with the agents, that was fun to record, and you're gonna see that in the future when we do the whole doc about how we're making the doc. Very meta, but yeah, just to give you some insight on what was going on. So we went there just to shoot the advertising thing, and then we just reached out to people we know, like, who do you think we should meet? And they connected us to 2 agents, and these are like big ass agents, like, you know, the Will Smith, Steven Spielberg type of agents. So we're out in the morning thinking that, okay, so we just have this morning off, let's go get some margaritas. It's 9 a.m. in the morning. So we're off. We knew that, like, okay, maybe we get this meeting, but you never know. So some of you might have watched the stories or a story that I did from the CAA office. So I'm out going for margaritas and I get a message that they want to meet. Can you meet at 11? And I mean, we're in Venice and we're supposed to go all the way to the Hollywood area. So we're just like, okay, what do we do? Do we go there in, I mean, dressed in Hawaii shirts and shorts, and this is like the most, like it's the most proper or corporate place I've ever been to. And we just think, oh, you know, F it. Let's just go there and own the whole thing. So we went there and we had the meeting. Well, you know, you have a lot of friends that you know from, you know, they know, we know. So it was kind of fun, and I told them about the margaritas thing, and we just owned that whole situation. But that's what you gotta do. So you'll see that in some time in the future. But it was very funny going there and just like, okay, so there's 1,000 people working here, and this is pretty much the top of everything. Meeting with them is not an easy thing to do. And then you're standing there in shorts, sneakers, and a Hawaii shirt. It can probably be the worst way to do it, but yeah. Anyway, so first question here. Oh yeah, for all of you, if anybody wants to try out the course, I don't know how we're gonna do it, so I'm gonna ask Andre right now, but during the whole Q&A, I'll just, I don't know, give you an email or something. And anybody that's interested in trying the course for free, because we need reviews when we put it out. So anybody that's willing to do reviews in terms of getting it for free, it's like a, I don't know, 2 or 3 hour course on color grading in DaVinci Resolve. Let us know, but I will just ask Andre right now so we know. He's probably watching this, but I still should make sure. So let me just ask him. And how many of you that we can give it away for free to. Okay, so first question. Have you ever tried to upscale to 2K or 4K for your Blackmagic pocket cinema footage on YouTube? 2K is super simple. I think 4K is probably super simple as well. I mean, when you shoot on a lower res sensor, you're gonna get a softer look. And that's like traditionally the same as shooting on Super 16. Super 16 has been like blown up in cinema for like eternity, it feels like. So it's not a hard thing to blow it up, but you need to be cautious that you don't get certain things falling apart. If you've exposed stuff incorrectly, if you have, for instance, a lot of noise, then that can be troublesome. But as long as you have like properly... Damn it. There's a phone that's making noise. I don't think you can hear it though. But as long as you have proper exposed material and all those things, it's not going to be an issue. It's just going to be a look. So you will, by having it a little bit softer, make it feel more organic. It won't feel as digital with all the sharpness going on in faces and all of those things. But it all depends on how proper like your material is from the get-go. So try it out. I don't think it should be any problem at all. I think the whole like upsizing to 4K is just like an illusion. I think it does not make any difference whatsoever as long as you have a look that is consistent, that is something that you want. If you're going for the sharp, like red or yeah, like the red 8K or 6K or whatever look, that is not what you're gonna get ever. But if you're going for a Super 16-like look, then that's something that you absolutely can achieve by resing it. How to color grade the V-Log of the GH5 to cinematic. I think actually some of that is included in the course. I don't know if we have any video out on it because it's newer material. We're making those types of tutorials as well, and you also have in the power grade that, like the sets that we've released, you also have those for the GH5. We're thinking of releasing both power grades and LUTs for GH5, and I think that's, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if we can kind of put together that for the cameras that we have, the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera and all those things, to create like specific looks for them. But I don't think it's a difficult thing to grade GH5. I think that it comes down to, as probably the tutorial this week as well on color grading will show, it comes down to kind of controlling and balancing things before you put a look on. So you need to deal with the saturation, the color balance, or white balance, the black points and contrast before you put a look on, because then all footage will look pretty similar once you have done that. But it's about cleaning up the stuff before you put a look on. And I think we go through that a little bit in these videos, but absolutely in the course we dig much deeper into that. But you can also probably, I don't know if I know which looks are for the GH5 that we have, but otherwise we're gonna release power grades that you can use for Resolve and LUTs that you can use for other programs for specifically GH5 in the future. How to make a catchy intro for a documentary yet without including drama in it. I think an important thing when you do a documentary is to catch people's attention straight away. And a lot of that comes down to making people ask questions. So if you have a scene in the beginning, it should open up for people to want to find out the answer by continuing to watching. So if you can start with having a scene that is iconic for the film and that sets the conflict or whatever the thing that the film is supposed to kind of unveil or discover throughout the whatever length it is. If you can set a scene that kind of shows that but doesn't answer the question, you should never ever answer a question that is vital to the narrative that early, then nobody will want to watch it. So you should just make people ask that question, and then you can go into like a some form of more like a maybe more moody or epic or whatever the feeling is that you're going for. If you go into like a collage or some sort that maybe have the title sequence or something like that included in it, but that tries to kind of picture the world that the film is going to take place. And for instance, in The Pearl of Africa, I think that we started with the scene that is Cleo in the hospital bed. But we didn't answer any questions. We just showed that she's in the hospital and that she's pretty much dying. That's what we wanted to establish. And then after that, we tried to show that this is going to be a journey, it's going to be a road movie type of thing through the first collage. Now this is really annoying. I need to fix this with the speakers. Freaking audio, always trouble. Yeah, and we just did that whole, we built the intro around first a scene, and then we did the first collage to kind of show the world that the story takes place. So to open up, not show the same thing as the first kind of intro. It's not very unlike the YouTube videos or the YouTube structures. It just might be a different pace or something. But I think the first like 5 and 10 minutes in a doc, if it's a feature, crucial. Like make it as short as it can be, but still, tell a story and try to make people ask questions and want to find out the answer. That's really important. I think that's like a huge thing to kind of paint the world that the story will take place in an inspiring way that people will get hooked onto. For us, that was kind of showing the love story, because that's what it's about. So showing them together in like a beautiful setting with them just traveling and doing a lot of things, not showing the conflict, much of that. We tried to keep that as late as we could, because we didn't want to alienate, for instance, Ugandans who were transphobic. We wanted them to just like ease into the story and then kind of get to the main story as they were already turned on to the story. And then it's hopefully too late for them to turn away. Okay. And also, you should definitely include drama in it. That's, I think that's crucial. Like, we didn't show the drama in terms of like the conflict with society and the whole hatred towards trans people or gay people in Uganda, because that wasn't the conflict to us. The conflict was her, Nelson and Cleo, not being able to love each other. And her conflict was also trying to overcome, you know, the hospital bed and that whole place that she's in where she's almost dead. So you have to show that. You have to make people care about the people. Otherwise, you don't have a person watching the film after 5 or 10 minutes. Damn it. Cough. I think it's because I smoked like hashish, water pipe. Just don't do it. Is it possible to make money editing videos, vlogs for other YouTubers? Probably not. Nobody makes any money. For example, if you're in Europe, you can edit videos for an American channel overnight. I mean, you can probably do it, but it's very hard to live off it. I think most people that are even at 1 million subs have a hard time hiring somebody to do their videos. We have an editor, but he's also working on advertising and feature films and all that. We couldn't just have that towards the YouTube channel because it's not making any money. But if you look at, for instance, I don't know, Casey, I don't think he has had editors for some time, probably on and off, but he could definitely get an editor. But what you get when you start using an editor is a long period of introducing that editor to your style, because YouTube is such a personal thing. So as soon as you start using an editor, you have to get them to edit it like you edit it. It's much more about like directing things in a proper way, and it took probably half a year for us to get to a place where I felt like comfortable starting to give more stuff without a lot of instructions. And then once that happens, it's a good thing because you become much more efficient. But I think a lot of people don't have the money to do it. And then they just edit themselves. Maybe they publish less each week. But that's gonna change though. So with time, it's totally gonna change. So I don't know, if you find a person like Gary and that sort of thing, maybe, but he likes to have people in the office. I think it's hard with a lot of those people because you usually have to have somebody in a location. I've tried this before. For instance, for the Pearl of Africa, I had a person logging the stuff in... Did we have one in Ukraine, I think, and then one in India, and one in New York? So we had like 3 different people working on it. And like all of it was difficult in some way. The most talented one was probably in Ukraine because he had a production company. But the struggle that we have with him was that he was just like off to some other place and wasn't available as much as we wanted. But it comes down to you giving the right instructions for it to work out. But all that like remote working, I'm all for that. We work like that. I rarely meet like Andre or Jonathan when we work on our regular stuff. So it definitely works, but it's much more difficult. So I think people try to stay away from it if they can. Yeah. What would you say is a good way to reach out to potential clients when starting out? I mean, the best way is always to have them discover you. So if they can discover you, you need to figure out how they discover things, first of all. But if you can make them discover you by themselves, then that's a great way of them contacting you. It's really, really difficult to walk up to somebody or email somebody and get some form of attention. Like, we struggle with it, even though we have a reel that should be good enough to get meetings. And we do get meetings with like random clients that we reach out to, but it's a very difficult thing to get any type of real project from them that is the right project. Usually those comes from the people that you worked with before, or it's just like a chance thing that your work is out there in the atmosphere, and then they discover it and they contact you because they want you to do the same thing for them. That's the best way, and it's the way that it usually works. So we just focus on putting our stuff out there to be out on all platforms and like in the media, doing like PR and that sort of thing. Creating projects that creates PR and buzz, and then that speaks for itself, and then they contact us because they like that. And that's a good filtering process that's organic, so we don't get people coming to us that we don't want to work with, because they get us, they know what we want to do and what we stand for. And I think that's much more important than just trying to get any random job. We try to get away from that, at least, because it's just stressful in the end when you try to just work with new people all the time. I just want to work with the same people because it's less of a starting phase. Because as soon as you work with somebody new, you always have to kind of invest a ton of time and energy to develop the relationship. And another thing to think about is to just focus on the relationships. Just focus on networking, not trying to get new clients. Just become friends with a lot of people naturally, and then you're gonna get asked to do things as long as you put your stuff out there for them to see. Yeah. Okay, let me see what Andre said about the course. Okay, so we're actually discussing what to okay, stay tuned. I will know before this ends. Let me see what the question was. So, is there a crop in AF lens like Sigma 1835 in C200 because it's Super 35? I asked that because I want to rent one and I don't know. This question I don't know. It's maybe somebody knows. So is there a crop in AF lens like Sigma 1835 in C200 because it has a Super 35? I asked because I want to rent one and I want wide angle lens like 80mm with a Steadicam. I mean, I don't know, I don't really understand the question either, but I use the 18 to 35 on the C300, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be exactly the same. And then I would say it definitely works. But if anybody knows. But of course, if you compare to full frame, which someone answered here, it's definitely going to be a crop, of course. But you're not going to get a cropped compared to what are the other lenses you have on that camera. So, but somebody might be able to clarify that. Hey Jonny, hello Dinan. for how long did you stay with Cleo and Nelson for the Pearl of Africa? Okay, so that's another questions as well. But I actually moved in with them. So first I went there for like a location scouting and character scouting or casting. I went there for like 8 days. That took a lot of time. I went around, met with a lot of organizations and that whole thing. Eventually I was introduced to Cleo. And with Cleo I met her then, and I spent a day with her, did an interview, and I shot the scene in the barbershop with her nephew, or like probably barbershop, I don't know. It's a scene in the film at least. And then I did an interview that I regret with all my life, because it was the situation. This is probably one of the most definite things that's changed how I work with interviews. So I went there and I did the interview, and I knew that, okay, so the sound is terrible outside. There's frogs, there's crickets, it's dark when we get to the interview. So I'm just like, okay, so I know that this is gonna be so painful that we pretty much have to do it in the car. And then I proposed that to Cleo. But Cleo gets uncomfortable, and I start to kind of ask myself if this is right, if I should avoid, getting her uncomfortable, because at that moment I felt like that was more important. And I think if I did this today, I have so much experience that I would have easily picked the car over being outside. But I didn't pick the car. Instead I went outside and I did the interview, and there's like frogs and crickets in the whole interview, and it's a really good interview, but it sucked in terms of audio quality. So the whole edit and the whole post-production with the sound design and all that has been kind of dictated by how the interviews was. So it was very hard to kind of cut that with a different interview. There was always crickets, screwed me over. So that was the first time that I met Cleo. And then the second time was, how long was it? Was it for like 2 weeks or something? I moved in with them for 1 week to shoot most of the stuff, and then I went and stayed with a friend in Uganda for the rest of the time. And then I went back and shot some things during that time as well. But it's usually been a really concise period of time, because Cleo hasn't had much time off work. So the best way that I saw that this would work was partly to get to know them as a couple and all that. If I moved in with them, it would be much easier. So I stayed in their spare room, rented that for that week, and then they were happy because they got the rent in, and I was just happy to be able to kind of control the situation, because moving around with all the logistics and waiting, and people are always late and that whole thing, I kind of erased that problem entirely just by living with them. And I also got closer to them, both as a friend and as a filmmaker. So that was how I did that, and then I think that was it in Uganda. And then she fled to Kenya. I went there for like 10 or 14 days, and then I actually stayed in a hotel. But then I had gotten to know them already, so it was easy to just go back and forth and shoot with them. And then we went on a trip to Mombasa together. So then we stayed with each other in separate rooms, but we still lived in a train, cabins next to each other, and then in the hotel. So then we stayed much closer. So that was like 10 or 14 days, and then it was like a month in Thailand together. So it was kind of a long filming time, actually. Also, I did a solid pre-production for my short docs. I have the shoot in 2 weeks. What should I make sure that I did? I mean, you need to cast the right person. That should be done by now, I'm guessing. You need to scout the locations, and you should probably plan everything according to what light is going to be in those locations when you shoot. If you have the opportunity to do pre-interviews, we usually do them. I don't do them because I want to have like fresh feelings of their answers. I don't know, that might sound weird, but I just feel it makes more natural interviews. I feel like I discover things as they happen, as I stay with them, or like now when we were in California, we did like a short doc for a brand, and I didn't do any pre-interviews. I just read like the brief that was given to me that came out of a pre-interview that our assistant did. So that whole interview just based around, like it was what I based the narrative structure around. And then I get there and like that whole narrative structure falls apart because her grandson, which was a vital part of that idea, was sick. So then you really need to rethink everything, and you need to be kind of on your toes to do that, and you need to kind of see the people. Like the way we did it, we had 2 days. No, we didn't even have 2 days. We came to California on Sunday, I think. Sunday evening we went out for like an hour or hour and a half, maybe 2, just to scout the locations and to get to meet with the people that we were shooting. So this is the first time that we met. And then you need to make them feel comfortable at that time, and just like talk to them, just ask them stuff and try to figure out like who they are and what their lives are all about. Second day we shot, and that was it. 17-hour day, it's super intimate. You hang out for a day pretty much, and then you might never see each other again, or you do. But it's a very different way of working, doing those types of short docs. But then it has to become intimate, so focus on that. Get the relationships really intimate, and it's gonna work out. But usually I want to do the interview as late as possible if I have little time, so I get to know them and I learn about them as we're filming. And you also, if you just start shooting, which I always do, I just want to follow them doing their everyday thing. Then they start to get comfortable. So once the interview happens, they're comfortable, they know you. So you should never, in my opinion, do the interview first. That's, yeah, very hard to get good answers, especially if you don't know the person. Okay, I'm doing an independent study for my film class on lighting's role in cinematography. Basically creating a short documentary script. Can you recommend any films that are known for its use of lighting? I mean, there are like any film that Roger Deakins has shot. I think, what's it called? I know I recommended it in the cinematography tutorial that I did. The Man Who Wasn't There, Coen Brothers, which Roger Deakins has shot. It's black and white. That one is a super distinct style that is totally dependent on the lighting. I think any of Von Kar-Wai's films that Christopher Doyle has shot is really interesting to watch. What else? I mean, Hoyte is probably interesting to watch, but then I would say maybe Let the Right One In, the Swedish version, is more interesting than the Hollywood films, because it's more raw and it's more distinct. Maybe also like Roy Andersson, and he uses different cinematographers, but I guess like Songs from the Second Floor would be interesting to kind of watch, because it's just like, what is it called, like tube lighting, or like the lighting fixtures, but it's a very soft light. Like everything is super soft, and the styling and the everything from scenography to styling is also super soft. It's like a very faded look just by the whole styling and scenography and all those things, and the light adds to that. So he usually works with perspectives in a really interesting way, because he can shoot in a room like this and make it feel like you're in a big hall, like a train hall, because they use perspectives. Like I was so inspired by him when I started out, but they use perspectives in like, okay, so the camera can only be in this position. He rarely moves the camera because everything is made to be that frame. So he usually paints an image with whatever he does. And that means that the perspectives of, for instance, how a bar would be built, it could be very, like you watching it could be very short, but it could feel like it's miles long because of how the perspective is worked out. I think there's like behind the scenes of that. I usually, like, when I started out, I used to watch so much of the DVDs and like the commentary and all those things. That was really interesting. I also had Roy Andersson as like a guest teacher and his DOP, so that's why I know so much about it. I've been in that studio and I've seen the whole builds and all that. But I think all the people that work more like planned in how they use light is interesting to watch and get inspired by, especially if you do docs, because usually doc people aren't the best at lighting. So I don't think it's really good to be inspired by that, because that's just like the lowest level that you should aim for. Not lighting is, you know, the worst way of lighting, but it sometimes is the only way to do it in doc work. But also look at still photographers, still documentary photographers, and like the masters of light, basically, that do like portrait photography and how they use light and composition. That's also interesting, I think. Finally, watched The Pearl of Africa. Did you use any bounce lighting or supplemental lights? Yeah, I always, when I don't have the opportunity to light, I usually just bring the ambience up, and I use the lighting that's there. So for instance, right now there's a window right there. I think when this Q&A started, it was much brighter. Usually you don't want to have a situation that changes like that. So it's all about trying to control the situation. And that means that maybe you have to block that window so that you don't get all of a sudden a sun coming in through the room. Or you should only focus on using the windows as a base light and then just work from there. Usually I try to work with the lights that already are in the room. So if we could say that this is a practical light, which actually is an LED tube that I've put there, or so hard, or that one, which is like also an LED strip that is put there because it's controllable. So I would use lights like this, but in that one it was mainly windows or like sun coming through a window or stuff like that. But I use those as a base light. So to create depth in a room, I would put them in a room some way in the framing, and then they would create the depth in the room, and then I would light so that the characters look properly exposed and all that. So that would usually mean putting like a light somewhere over here, just one light usually, to bring the ambience of the room up, and to bring just one light in that sets a character and gets exposure right in the face. And I don't think I have one, but it was this Came TV light. That's when I run through the whole gear stuff that I used for Confused African, you can see the light there. That was the basic setup I had, like one tiny LED and then one panel. And usually on a battery, just to make it flexible and move it around with a V-Lock battery. I think that was it. Outside I just used natural light all the time, I think. And that's also something that was a problem when I was grading it, which you can see in the grading episode, with a lot of noise. Yep. Don't 2/4 have to be foreign, not from the US or UK. Okay, but back to the question about light and film. Look at like the Asian cinema. Look at Wong Kar-wai. Look at I guess the Swedish then is interesting. French cinema. Look at what DPs is there? I mean, it's probably interesting to look at also both, like, look at Delicatessen. I don't know who made that one, but that's an interesting film to watch if you haven't watched it. And look at the maybe Danish Dogma area with like von Trier and who else? Thomas Vinterberg. There's a lot of natural stuff, like natural light, that was in the Dogma era. I mean, they broke those rules as well. But what came out of it afterwards is also interesting to look at, like how they stayed true to natural light. Yeah, maybe the Dardenne brothers, look at who shot their stuff. Yeah, because they used like natural light, but or they make it look natural, even though it's not. Okay, next question. You work for brands. How do they put their nose in your work, or do you have some kind of creative freedom to produce? The way it usually works is that you pretty much have no say in the ID and often the script. Oftentimes it's like driven through a voiceover that they've written, and there's like baby things that you can change about it. But when you get on board, they have already set the whole ID, basically. So they have had a brief that they pitched, and now you come in as a production company and as a director, you need to put together a new pitch that's your unique angle of capturing that ID that was sold to them. And usually this is a whole campaign that has a lot of other components as well tied to it, so it's not just the film that you're making, it's also like adverts in like public places, all those things like billboards, a lot of stuff in the same campaign. So you come in and you don't have much to say except for the aesthetics and how it's going to be made, basically. Sometimes this will be something that varies. For instance, when we made the stuff now in LA, it was very free. We propose the person, we write the script, we suggest what images to shoot. Like, it's just like making a doc. The only limit being that, okay, the concept is showing like vintage owners of Saabs. That was it. So it's like doing that whole, like working with the limits that you're given, and then it's very random how much freedom you have, but you're usually not having much freedom. It's usually very little that you can affect except for how it looks and how it's made, like practically how it's made. But usually though, when you pitch on a project, you should push it. You should push it as much as you can. It's better to lose it and going all in on your vision than to do something that's just like making their stuff and yeah, then you're just gonna become like the director or production company that just does the stuff that the agencies want to produce just like they want them, and you will get bored of that in no time. Okay. So I see a lot of film have a hard blue grading color. Can the course show us the way for that look, or is it just color correcting and fixing light, not super advanced one? It's actually pretty advanced. Like, I take you through first of all, like cleaning up an image, like my regular process of like denoising an image to how I set the color balance, how I do the saturation, how that whole cleaning process until sharpening is made, and then putting a look on it and how that look is built up, everything from like orange teal to how I did it in Confused African, and showing you like the problems that you can run into, which can be very random. It can be like cleaning up a really noisy image to just like fixing discolored surfaces in a face or in like mixed lighting, all those types of things. Yeah, I would say it's probably more advanced than the most of the stuff that you will see, but it is a course that anybody that know pretty little about grading can actually take. So it starts from the basic and then it takes you into pretty advanced like how you set up a grading suite. What should you think about? How do you calibrate your monitors in the proper way and the cheap way? And like just making it practical, showing you how I make it, but also like how do you work with clients and all those things. So it's pretty advanced, but yeah, the looks is so much based on like what you want. It's a subjective thing that it varies from project to project, and this will show you maybe how you export a LUT, but it's not about using LUTs in that sense. It's more about like creating things from scratch. How do you do that? And then when you have that, maybe you export it to a LUT, or that's at least what I show. That's the idea, at least. It's a pretty long course. It's focused on DaVinci Resolve because that's a much more professional tool than a Premiere or a Final Cut. So what you can do in Final Cut and Premiere is very, very basic. And it's very, very hard to do stuff in a specific and detailed way there because it's built up like that. The simplified way is too simplified. So if you take the course, it's much more going to be like, how do you grade properly as a professional colorist? What's their like progression from starting and to finishing, and why do they do it? Yeah, that's it. Okay. Really love these Q&As. Recently discovered your channel and watch them pretty much daily. Any tips for filming kids? Oh, I did that. Yeah, I do have. So getting good answers out of them and catching them in a natural way in docs. So I've done two things recently. One before Christmas and then one now. Yeah, let's start with the LA one. So I went to LA and I was just like looking for people to meet up with. We met up actually and hang out with Mango Street while we were there. So we tried to mix like the agent stuff that we do for the doc as well as with the YouTube. But then I also was randomly on Instagram and I found this kid who skateboards. He was 8 years old and like he does amazing things. Like he will be a pro and probably a superstar. And he skates in Venice and we were gonna stay there. So I was just like, oh, let's hit him up and see if we can do something. So we had, like, this is something that we just packed into a full day where we had meetings going around. Like first we met with an agent in the morning when we didn't get to have those margaritas, and then we went to hang out with Mango Street, and then afterwards we just like went back to Venice to shoot this kid. And that's the first time that we met. We had 2 hours with him, and you know, he's just like interested in skating. That's all it is. And in that time, you need to kind of get an interview going, and you need to get him comfortable, you need to get his parents comfortable, and you need to get him to perform as a skateboarder and all that. So we just did that, and we just went there, hang out with them for a while, just like talking to them, getting them comfortable. We were the agency guy that we were there with, and then it was me and Andre basically. So Andre and the guy from the agency, they just hang out with the parents, and I went to shoot with the kid. And then I just let him do his thing. I just let him skate for a while, probably an hour or so, just to get him comfortable. And I start to feel like, okay, so time is running out. I need to kind of get things going. So then I start to try to get him to, you know, psychologically move away from the park, because he could be in the skate park all day, and that would not make for a good short doc, because you know, you want to mix the locations, you want to have it feel like you've shot for more than an hour and a half, which we ended up doing. So the doc, like, it was a random thing. We didn't know, like, what would it be about. So we started to think about what the interview could be. First we thought maybe the dad, maybe something about him, like his dad being like his manager and that sort of thing with social media. But then his dad was not very well at speaking English, so it felt like that would be an obstacle to kind of get him to nail it. We could do it in Japanese, but that would probably be you know, a big hassle to get that to work. We would have to have a translator for me to do the interview. It would be a much bigger thing. So we ended up just trying to do it, and just like did it as a really low-key thing. I mean, we had the gear, we had the Ursa Mini 4.6K with us, but I just left that because we were running around with meetings. We just have the X5R and the GH5 and like my small backpack. So basically the gear that I packed for this Christmas. So if you can find that video, that's probably pretty much what I used. And we went there, we shot that stuff in the park, and then afterwards I just like, okay, so we need to go skate around Venice to get some different shots, just to get more of like him as a portrait. Went and did that, and then once we had done that and had some different locations and all that, and I mean, we had an hour and a half from meeting the kid to sitting and having the interview done. So you need to talk a lot to the people that you do this with. If it's a kid, you need to speak to them and hang out with them and just like be friends with them. And it has to happen like so fast. Luckily he was used to cameras, so that wasn't an issue. But then we just went away, went into like an alley because I wanted to be more quiet. Walk past like some homeless people that are standing with some police, and you know, you need permits to shoot there, but we didn't have that, so we just walked past. I just recorded with like this type of lav into my Electrosonics PDR, so we just recorded the audio. And first, I think I messed up the audio for the first part, so I had to do the interview all over, because somehow the recorder stopped and I didn't watch the recorder. So I did like 15 minutes of interview, and then I noticed that the recorder was off. So these things happen. So then after that I was just like, okay, damn it. So I asked the questions again, and of course like it got a little bit different answers and all that, and I didn't really know like what would this end up being, because like you're sitting with a kid and it's so hard to do interviews. So the crucial aspect of getting good interviews is trying to have them hang out with you and become comfortable. And when you have that little time, it's really hard to get to that place. And every kid or teenager has a really simplified way of thinking, and they cannot express themselves, most of them, in a very eloquent way. So you have to simplify your questions as well, and you need to have them be very... You cannot have yes and no type of questions. You should never have that, but especially with kids you shouldn't have it, because it's so easy for them to just say yes and no, and you know, then you will struggle to get any proper answer from them. So while I do the interview, I have to figure out what the film is going to be about, what could be interesting. And now I've actually done a rough cut of the whole thing as I got back, and I just feel like, oh, this actually is something. And it's much more, like I knew that probably the film will be about dreams, but I didn't know how and what. So I was just asking like random questions about like stuff that's connected to dreams. And eventually I think I found something that can work. I don't know if I'm gonna include my voiceover or not in the whole thing, but that's just something to watch out for, and do press record or whatever I did wrong, I don't even know, when you do that interview. Another thing that I did recently with kids was, this was a commercial where we were in a studio and did for a bank, we did like asking kids, probably like 20 or 15 kids, what they would do if they got 20K from their parents. What would they do with that money? And that was supposed to bring like funny answers with them dreaming away about like what they would do with kids, or with the money, what the kids would do with the money. So we set up a whole thing in the studio where we had two people that all they did was to go into the room when the parents came with the kids, and they hung out, they played with them in that room. So I didn't do the interviews because we felt like it would be impossible for me to get that relationship going. We had like maybe 15-30 minutes with the kids before they did the interview. So we had instead two people that all they did was to sit in the room and play with them, and then they came out and they asked the questions that we wanted them to ask. So they were the main person that they communicated with, and that was just to get the kids comfortable. And I don't think we could have done it in any other way. And that was a challenge, because then you need to be really clear about like what the questions should be and what they should ask. So instead we had to, like, every time we had a kid, at least until we set the tone of it, we had to direct the people that were asking the questions, so that they, when they came with the next person, they asked a little bit differently. Yeah, I think that was pretty much what we learned from that. And I asked a little bit similar questions now when I did the interview in LA as well. Just like, what would you do when you become a professional skateboarder? That type of question. What would you do with all the money, or like, and those things actually work. They bring out an interesting answer from a kid. And I think you need to think about, like, how do you get them to be emotional and think it's fun to answer a question? Those types of question works the best. So when he, for instance, answered like what he would do if he got all the money in the world, then he started to imagining building a skate park and that sort of thing. But before that, it was very, like, simple answers. So just like buy a house, and no details into it. So you need to get them to elaborate, and that's much harder with kids, because they usually just answer the question as a task and not, philosophically. I really love your style, and I think you're very inspiring. Thank you. I'm wondering how to begin making short films, but I'm in the lack of writing skills to tell stories. From where do you get your inspirations? I think for me, I was in a similar situation where I felt like it was too predictable to write stuff. So I started working with docs because of that as well. I thought the process of making docs was more interesting because it's real people and you need to figure them out and try to piece it together more in a organic way than writing stuff. I rarely watch feature films that are fictional today. I think it's too boring, the narrative structures that's out there. I think that every film pretty much becomes predictable because it has to have the 3-act structure and you have to build everything around the whole drama that is in every film. So docs, just because you can't control things, they will make the stories less predictable. You will get a different narrative with every film because it's so hard to control. And I think you should try to put yourself in that situation where you try to tell stories that way. If you can do docs, that's a good way to learn how to structure things also. But you should probably write as much as you can in order for you to be a better writer, or just collaborate with people, because there's always people who likes to write stuff but can't shoot as well. But I think if you try to write stuff that's personal, then it should be easier to find the details and all those things. If that's like a dying grandmother or whatever it is, or you and your brother or sister and your relationship, whatever it is, or lover, dog, write about those things that you care about, and it's much easier. I'm shooting a documentary. I've shot a few interviews for it already, but I struggle to get people I interviewed to be comfortable. They often represent some kind of company, but I want to hear their personal stories too. Any tips? I think the best way is to hang out with them. I think that the worst thing you can do if you want people to be natural is to shoot an interview. I think that's the last thing you should do in any type of filmmaking. When you start doing the interview, you need to have a relationship with the people for it to be a good interview. And that goes for all the interviews, even the ones that are like drilled, like media drilled. If you just film somebody, if you make a story about somebody that's just themselves, so for instance, if you make something about a fisherman, every time that person is fishing, he or she is going to be totally natural. It's going to be their element. As soon as you put them in a place where they don't belong, like a studio, it's going to feel uncomfortable. So you need to get them to be in places or situations that are natural to them. Then they will be much more comfortable with the camera and with the answers that they give you. But you should also just try recording just audio. Some people are much more comfortable with that. I just do that nowadays. I rarely shoot interviews with video because I just feel like it doesn't add anything. I don't like that style as well. I don't like talking head docs. I think that kind of, yeah, it limits how you tell stories. I do it when I do the vlogs, and now that I've worked with vlogs for such a long time, it kind of becomes an interesting thing to play with, you talking into the camera, because it does add something. But as a general thing, I don't think it adds anything to have talking heads. But when you have it addressed to the person, or when you have a talking head at some point in the doc, then it adds something. It's a tool to get a connection with the audience. But when you have talking head driving the whole story, then you lose out, because you can't make a cinematic and an emotional story that way. Like, how much do you care about a person that's just sitting and talking and that cries? Not as much as if you see them in real life. You should always aim for that, to show their life and their world first, and then, I mean, you will listen to them or whatever. Okay, that's gonna be it for this week. Let me just see what Andre wrote. Okay, so he's saying that 5 of you that was watching this one, some people have already sent your emails, but anybody that still wants to try the course, put your email in the chat, and I won't stop the stream for a little bit, and then afterwards I'll upload the Q&A, and if we don't have 5, which we almost already have, so that's probably not gonna happen, but if we won't have it, you can also comment when this comes out as another video. Otherwise, what did you write? Maybe this is gonna be a secret. No, otherwise we're gonna release 10 more on Wednesday when the grading course comes out. So turn on your notifications and go in straight away, and yeah, give us your details and you will be able to get that course. Okay, so see you guys, and yeah, happy Easter.